Now to a story we've been following. Houston police looking for this man here. They say he killed Felicia Johnson. She's the California woman who disappeared during a visit to Houston more than 8 weeks ago. Arugochi Iloka has been following this case since Johnson went missing back in April and gives us a timeline on her disappearance.
Let's take you back to the day Felicia Johnson vanished. Now, HPD homicide detectives say the 24-year-old was seen leaving a car from this hotel she was staying at in the early morning hours of April 16th. Investigators say this was the last time she stepped through those doors alive. 28-year-old Chukwu Ebuka Nwobodo has been charged with Felicia's murder and tampering with evidence. Investigators say Felicia was visiting from California when she was reported missing back on April 16th after her bloody phone was discovered in a road at Bear Creek Pioneers Park.
I'll be back in a few hours. Those were the last words 24-year-old Felicia Johnson ever sent to her mother on March 15th, 2017. She never came back. What happened next will make you question everything you think you know about trust, desperation, and the monsters who walk among us disguised as saviors. Felicia thought she was about to make $500 for what seemed like easy work. The man who contacted her appeared legitimate, professional even. He promised her exactly the amount she desperately needed, and he knew exactly how to present himself as her solution. But here's what will shock you to your core. The man who brutally murdered Felicia Johnson wasn't some random stranger lurking in dark alleys. He was someone who positioned himself as her helper. Someone who knew her financial struggles and used them against her. Someone who made her believe he was offering her a lifeline when he was actually planning her death. The $500 he promised? It was never real. It was bait in the most calculated, cold-blooded trap you can imagine. This isn't just another true crime story about a victim and a killer. This is about how predators identify vulnerability, exploit desperation, and destroy lives while wearing the mask of a good Samaritan. Felicia trusted the wrong person with her life, and that trust cost her everything. But the most disturbing part? This could happen to anyone, including someone you love. Before we expose the horrifying details of this case that will leave you speechless, I need to ask you something that matters. If you're someone who believes justice matters, if you think victims like Felicia deserve to have their stories told properly and their memories honored, then prove it right now. Hit that subscribe button. Because if you can't even do that simple act for Felicia, then maybe you're part of the problem. And for those of you who won't subscribe, I already know you'll be in the comments explaining why. Go ahead, tell us why Felicia's story isn't worth a simple click. Tell us why her life doesn't deserve 30 seconds of your time. I'll be reading every excuse, every justification for why you'll consume her story, but won't support the platform that brings you these cases. Make it make sense. On the surface, Felicia Johnson had everything going for her. At 24 years old, she was the kind of daughter every mother dreams of: ambitious, loving, and fiercely loyal to her family. She had just celebrated her birthday with plans that seemed to promise a bright future ahead. Her social media painted the picture of a young woman who was living her best life, surrounded by friends and family who adored her. But here's what nobody saw coming, what even her closest family members didn't fully understand at the time. Behind Felicia's bright smile and confident posts, she was drowning in financial pressure that was about to make her vulnerable to the most dangerous kind of predator. The kind who studies their victims, learns their weaknesses, and strikes when desperation clouds judgment. Felicia needed money, and she needed it fast. Not for drugs, not for partying, not for anything reckless or irresponsible. She needed exactly $500 for something that would change her life for the better. This wasn't greed or materialism. This was survival. This was necessity. This was the kind of financial emergency that forces good people to consider options they would never normally entertain. And that's exactly what her killer was counting on. Predators don't target the wealthy or the secure. They target people like Felicia, hardworking, desperate, and willing to trust someone who appears to offer a solution. They study social media. They listen to conversations. They identify who needs what. And then they position themselves as the answer to prayers. What makes this case so terrifying is how normal everything seemed at first. Felicia wasn't walking down dark streets at midnight. She wasn't meeting strangers in abandoned buildings. She thought she was engaging in a legitimate business transaction with someone who had been recommended to her. Someone who knew exactly what to say to make her feel safe, secure, and grateful for the opportunity. The financial pressure Felicia was under wasn't unusual or shameful. Thousands of young adults face similar situations every day. Unexpected expenses, bills that can't wait, opportunities that require immediate cash. What was unusual was how perfectly her killer had positioned himself to exploit that pressure. He didn't just offer her money, he offered her hope. But here's the part that will make your blood run cold. While Felicia was planning how to use that $500 to improve her situation, her killer was planning something entirely different. He had no intention of paying her anything. He had no intention of letting her walk away alive. The job offer, the professional demeanor, the promise of easy money. It was all theater, all performance, all designed to get her exactly where he wanted her. The connection between them wasn't random. It wasn't a chance encounter or a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was calculated, methodical, and absolutely ruthless. He had been watching, learning, and waiting for the perfect moment when her desperation would override her caution. And when that moment came, he struck with the precision of someone who had done this before. Here's what that $500 was really for, and why it made Felicia the perfect target. The man who would become her killer had offered her money to clean his apartment. Simple, straightforward, legitimate work that thousands of people do every day to make ends meet. He presented himself as a busy professional who needed help with deep cleaning before an important event. Nothing suspicious, nothing that would raise red flags for a young woman desperate for quick cash. But this wasn't about cleaning at all. This was about getting Felicia alone, isolated, and completely vulnerable in a space where he had total control. He chose cleaning specifically because it required her to come to his location, to be there for several hours, and to be completely focused on physical work that would leave her distracted and tired. Every detail was calculated to put her at maximum disadvantage. The manipulation started weeks before he ever made the offer. He had been studying her social media, learning about her financial struggles, understanding her personality and what would appeal to her. He knew she was responsible, hardworking, and proud. Exactly the type of person who would prefer earning money through honest work rather than asking for handouts. He crafted his approach specifically to appeal to those qualities. When he finally reached out, he didn't just offer her a job. He offered her respect. He told her he had heard she was reliable, trustworthy, and thorough. He made her feel chosen, special, like he was doing her a favor by selecting her over other candidates. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about validation, about being seen as valuable and capable. The $500 amount wasn't random either. He had calculated exactly how much she needed, exactly what would be irresistible, but not so much that it would seem suspicious. He positioned it as fair payment for a full day's work, maybe even slightly generous, making her feel grateful rather than cautious. He was playing chess while she thought they were just having a conversation.
It has been 2 months since police identified this man wanted in the murder of 24-year-old Felicia Johnson. The California woman disappeared while visiting Houston in April. Well, tonight, her father speaking out for the first time since learning his daughter was killed.
He spoke exclusively with Brittany Ford on their family's need for closure.
Felicia's father, Kevin, says the last few months have been a roller coaster of emotions. He says their family is standing strong and will not stop until they get justice for Felicia. A father's plea to the Houston community.
And it's been 2 weeks to just come forward and just say something. I can't put it into words.
Sparked extensive search efforts for Felicia Johnson in early April. Johnson went missing after taking a trip to Houston for her 24th birthday.
I felt like that could have killed me. Just to find out like that, what happened to her and the information.
Her father, Kevin, alongside Felicia's stepmother, Myra, speaking to us via Zoom from San Diego. trying to grasp a reality that doesn't feel real.
Very, very difficult for me as a father, know that I'm not going to see my daughter ever again and ever talk to her again.
This is the man police say is wanted for Felicia's murder, 28-year-old Chika Upaka Unwubudu. Court documents reveal Johnson had met Unwubudu online and later sent an Uber to her hotel in the medical center, where she was eventually taken to his South Richmond apartment. Investigators say they found DNA matching Felicia's at his apartment, and in his car, a gun, knife, and shovel. Details her father is still working to process.
I've been dealing with depression. I've been dealing with severe PTSD, anxiety, hypertension, high blood pressure, you name it.
The investigation would go on to find Unwubudu bought cleaning supplies and made internet searches, including how to be a serial killer. Court documents say Houston police pulled Unwubudu over in a traffic stop on May 13th, but he was later released. There are still questions into why police let him go. He's been on the run ever since.
It's been a nightmare, and he's probably killed again already.
Their family now on a journey for closure.
I can't sleep, and I can't stop until I have my daughter's found and this man found.
Brittany Ford, KHOU 11 News.
Police may have found the remains of his daughter, Felicia Johnson.
Felicia went missing during her trip to Houston last year. Brittany Ford joins us with more about the possible break in the case. Brittany.
Well, Mia, Felicia's father, Kevin, says the update has given their family a sense of hope in what has been a years-long journey for closure. It's a phone call Kevin Johnson has been desperately waiting for.
They wouldn't have notified me if they didn't think it was her. I believe it's her.
Johnson says Houston police notified him Wednesday that remains, strongly believed to be that of his 24-year-old daughter Felicia, were found in Montgomery County.
The jury was on the body. That was hers. We're just waiting for the dental records to, actually have the 1,000%.
He says they're still waiting on the medical examiner's office to officially confirm, but are looking forward to the day they can lay Felicia to rest.
It's a blessing. It's a score for us. It's a score for the family. Whenever they release her, then I will be able to have a service for her and pay her the respects that she needs.
Felicia went missing in April of last year after taking a trip from her home in San Diego to Houston for her birthday. Court documents say she met 28-year-old Chika Upaka Unwubudu on an escorting website. Unwubudu is the suspect wanted for her murder. Investigators would later find DNA strongly matching that of Felicia's at his home and a gun, knife, and shovel in his car, including internet searches in his phone related to how to be a serial killer and most forested places in Houston. He's still on the run.
I was in anguish. I still am, because I want the perpetrators to be caught.
This comes as the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office says a TxDOT worker found possible skeleton remains in the Sam Houston National Forest Tuesday, but they have not confirmed whether that's connected to Felicia's case.
The fight is not going to stop until everybody is brought to justice.
And again, we reached out to the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, Houston Police, and the Medical Examiner's Office. None would confirm the connection to the remains found Tuesday.
Yeah, Brittany, this family, the dad in particular, has been through a lot, going back a year. They're in California. How do they move forward here?
They didn't immediately check her phone records, didn't canvass the area where she was last seen, didn't treat her case with the urgency that could have made all the difference. But Felicia's family refused to accept the system's indifference. Her mother became a one-woman investigation force, calling the police station daily, organizing community searches, and demanding answers that nobody seemed interested in providing. She knew her daughter better than any officer who had spent 5 minutes reading a report, and she knew something terrible had happened. The breakthrough came not from brilliant detective work, but from technology that the killer didn't fully understand. His biggest mistake was believing he could outsmart digital forensics in 2017. Every text message, every phone call, every GPS ping from both their devices created a trail that was impossible to erase completely. The same smartphone technology he used to lure Felicia became the evidence that would destroy him. Phone records revealed the extensive communication between them leading up to her disappearance. But more importantly, they revealed his lies. He had told police he barely knew Felicia, that they had only exchanged a few messages about possible work. The records showed weeks of conversation, detailed planning, and coordination that proved premeditation beyond any reasonable doubt. The GPS data was even more damning. Both phones showed Felicia arriving at his apartment complex at exactly the time she had told her mother she would be there for work. But only one phone ever left that location. Her phone went dead at his apartment and never transmitted another signal. His phone, however, showed multiple trips to various locations around the city over the following days. Locations that would later prove to be body disposal sites and evidence dumping grounds. But here's what almost derailed the entire investigation. The initial crime scene had been compromised by the killer's cleaning efforts and the delayed police response. By the time detectives finally treated this as a serious case, crucial evidence had been destroyed or contaminated. The apartment had been cleaned multiple times, potential witnesses had scattered, and the trail was growing colder by the hour. The case was saved by one witness, who almost didn't come forward. A neighbor had seen Felicia entering the apartment building that morning, and had noticed something that seemed off about the man who let her in. But this witness was initially afraid to get involved, afraid of retaliation, afraid of being dragged into a legal mess. It took weeks of community pressure and family pleading before they finally contacted police. That witness testimony, combined with the digital evidence, finally gave investigators enough to obtain search warrants and make an arrest. But even then, the killer almost walked free because of the investigative delays and evidence contamination. His defense team argued that the case was built on circumstantial evidence and digital data that could have been manipulated or misinterpreted. The DNA evidence that finally sealed his fate was found in the most unlikely place, under Felicia's fingernails, preserved despite all his cleaning efforts. She had fought back. She had marked her killer. And that microscopic evidence became the proof that no amount of bleach or manipulation could destroy. Modern forensic science succeeded where traditional investigation had failed. The confession attempt came during interrogation when he realized the evidence was overwhelming. But even his confession was calculated and self-serving. He tried to claim it was an accident, that things had gotten out of hand, that he never meant for anyone to get hurt. Every word was designed to minimize his culpability and generate sympathy he absolutely did not deserve. From Felicia's disappearance to her killer's conviction took almost 2 years. 2 years of her family fighting a system that initially didn't care. 2 years of legal battles and procedural delays. 2 years of watching a monster try to escape justice through technicalities and lies. The sentence he finally received, life without parole, was justice. But it came at a cost that should never have been necessary. The psychological evaluation of Felicia's killer revealed a monster who had been hiding in plain sight for years, perfecting his technique and selecting victims with the precision of a predator who understood exactly how society's blind spots worked. This wasn't some unhinged maniac acting on impulse. This was a calculated psychopath who had turned murder into a methodical process. His background reads like a textbook case of escalating antisocial behavior that everyone around him chose to ignore or excuse. Childhood incidents of animal cruelty that were dismissed as boys being boys. Teenage episodes of manipulation and control that were written off as normal relationship drama. Early adult encounters with law enforcement that somehow never resulted in serious consequences because he knew exactly how to present himself as harmless and misunderstood. The psychological profile revealed something that will chill you to the bone. He specifically targeted women who were financially vulnerable because he understood that desperation makes people ignore their survival instincts. He had studied this, researched it, and developed a system for identifying and exploiting women who needed money quickly and were willing to work for it privately. But here's what makes him truly terrifying. He wasn't some obvious creep lurking in shadows. He was charming, articulate, and convincing. He held down a regular job, maintained normal social relationships, and presented himself as a respectable member of society. The people who knew him described him as helpful, reliable, and trustworthy. He was the neighbor who would offer to help carry groceries, the coworker who remembered birthdays, the guy who seemed genuinely nice. The $500 amount he consistently offered wasn't random. It was psychologically calculated. Too little, and desperate women might not take the risk. Too much, and they would become suspicious. $500 was the sweet spot that represented significant help without triggering alarm bells. He had tested different amounts over time and settled on this figure because it produced the highest success rate for getting women alone. His method of operation revealed years of refinement and practice. The cleaning job offer was perfect because it required victims to come to his controlled environment, to be there for extended periods, and to be physically engaged in work that would tire them and lower their guard. He had tried other approaches, photography sessions, personal assistant work, house sitting, but cleaning provided the best combination of legitimacy and vulnerability. The most disturbing aspect of his psychology was how he viewed his victims. The evaluation revealed that he didn't see them as human beings with families, dreams, and futures. He saw them as problems to be solved, as objects that served a purpose and then needed to be disposed of efficiently. Felicia wasn't a person to him. She was a successful test of his system, nothing more. His digital footprint revealed the extent of his planning and the coldness of his approach. He had researched forensic techniques, studied police procedures, and analyzed other murder cases to improve his own methods.
Human remains found in Montgomery County earlier this month have been confirmed as those of Felicia Johnson.
She's the 24-year-old San Diego woman who disappeared while visiting Houston in April of last year, and investigators are still looking for the man charged in her death. Those remains were found in Sam Houston National Forest back on February 7th. Aniela Ruiz is live. What else are you learning tonight, Aniela?
Well, investigators are telling us they hope this brings her family some kind of closure, but HPD continues searching for the man they believe murdered Felicia Johnson. What was supposed to be a birthday trip to Houston turned deadly for 24-year-old Felicia Johnson. She was visiting from San Diego back in April of last year and vanished. And now investigators say DNA and dental records confirm the remains found at the Sam Houston National Forest earlier this month are hers. We spoke to Felicia Johnson's dad when the remains were found, and even then, he knew those remains were his daughter.
Whenever they release her, then I will be able to have a service for her and pay her the respects that she needs.
Houston police have charged 28-year-old Chukwubuka Nobudu with her murder. He's on the run. His arrest warrant said they met on an escort website before she disappeared on April 16th of last year. The warrant says they found DNA strongly matching Felicia's at Nobudu's home, and a gun and a knife and a shovel in his car. Investigators say they also found searches related to how to be a serial killer and most forwarded places in Houston.
I was in anguish. I still am, because I want the perpetrators to be caught.
And now that her remains have been found, many hope this brings her family one step closer to getting the closure they deserve.
And at least you don't have to wonder and question, where is she? What happened to her? At least you have that now. And now we can move on to the next step, and that's catching this guy and bringing him to justice.
Now, if you have any information on the suspect, you're told to contact police or Crime Stoppers. There is a $5,000 reward. Reporting live, Anayeli Ruiz, KHOU 11 News.
He treated killing like a hobby he was passionate about perfecting, constantly looking for ways to reduce risk and increase efficiency. But here's what could have prevented Felicia's murder and the murders of his other victims. Recognizing the warning signs that everyone around him chose to ignore. His pattern of seeking out financially desperate women wasn't new. His habit of offering work that required isolation wasn't coincidental. His knowledge of forensic countermeasures wasn't academic curiosity. These were red flags that could have saved lives if anyone had been paying attention. The prevention analysis revealed systematic failures at every level. Dating apps and job platforms had no screening processes for predators who used their services to hunt victims. Law enforcement had no protocols for recognizing patterns of manipulation that preceded violent crimes. Society had no framework for protecting vulnerable women from predators who specifically targeted financial desperation. Most importantly, there were no safety protocols in place for the kind of informal work arrangements that millions of people rely on to survive. No verification systems, no check-in procedures, no emergency contacts required. Felicia walked into that apartment with no safety net because society had never bothered to create one for people in her situation. The psychological evaluation concluded that he would have continued killing indefinitely if he hadn't been caught. Felicia wasn't his first victim, and the evidence suggested he had been refining his technique for at least 5 years before her murder. Each successful kill had made him more confident, more careless, and more convinced of his own superiority over law enforcement and forensic science. The way society responded to Felicia's disappearance and murder exposed ugly truths about how we value certain lives over others, and how our biases literally cost people their lives. Because Felicia was a young woman seeking informal work to solve financial problems, she was immediately placed in a category that receives less attention, less resources, and less urgency from the very systems designed to protect all citizens equally. The media coverage of her case perfectly illustrated this bias. When wealthy college students go missing, their stories dominate headlines for weeks. When women like Felicia disappear, they get buried on page 6 if they're lucky. The initial news reports focused more on her financial struggles than on the fact that a predator was hunting vulnerable women in their community. They treated her desperation as a character flaw rather than recognizing it as the vulnerability that made her a target. This wasn't just media bias. This was institutional bias that infected every level of the response to her case. Police allocated fewer resources because they assumed she would turn up eventually. Prosecutors initially considered lesser charges because they worried about convincing juries to care about victims like Felicia. Even victim services organizations provided less support because they had limited resources and prioritized cases they considered more likely to generate public sympathy. The community response revealed how deeply these biases run in our society. When Felicia's family organized search parties, attendance was sparse compared to similar efforts for victims who fit society's definition of the perfect victim. When they held vigils, local officials were notably absent. When they demanded answers from law enforcement, they were told to be patient and let the system work, the same system that had already failed their daughter. But here's what makes this systemic failure even more infuriating. Law enforcement had the tools and knowledge to prevent Felicia's murder, but they weren't using them effectively. They knew that predators target financially vulnerable women. They knew that informal work arrangements create dangerous situations. They knew that certain types of job offers are commonly used to lure victims. Yet there were no proactive measures in place to protect women like Felicia. The training deficiencies revealed by this case were staggering. Officers weren't taught to recognize the manipulation tactics used by predators who target desperate victims. Detectives weren't trained to prioritize cases involving vulnerable populations. Forensic teams weren't equipped with the latest technology that could have processed evidence faster and more effectively. The entire system was operating with outdated protocols that reflected outdated priorities. Policy changes implemented after Felicia's case proved that prevention was always possible. It just wasn't considered important enough until a family's grief became too loud to ignore. New protocols required immediate investigation of missing persons cases involving vulnerable populations. Enhanced training programs taught officers to recognize predatory patterns. Technology upgrades improved evidence, processing times, and accuracy. But these changes came too late for Felicia and too late for the other victims, whose cases had been mishandled by the same systemic failures. How many women died because society decided their lives weren't worth the same level of protection afforded to others? How many families suffered because bias masqueraded as procedure? How many killers escaped justice because the system was designed to fail certain victims? The resource allocation revealed the most damning truth of all. Money was available for proper investigations, advanced forensic technology, and comprehensive victim services. It just wasn't being spent on cases like Felicia's. Wealthy communities got state-of-the-art crime labs, while working-class areas made do with outdated equipment. High-profile cases got unlimited overtime budgets, while cases involving vulnerable victims got whatever resources were left over. The ripple effect of Felicia's murder extended far beyond her immediate family. Her mother became an advocate for missing persons cases involving vulnerable populations, fighting to ensure other families wouldn't face the same indifference and delays. Her siblings struggled with survivor guilt and lost faith in the institutions they had been taught to trust. Her friends became hypervigilant about safety in ways that limited their own opportunities and freedom. The community changes that followed her case were significant but insufficient. Local law enforcement implemented new protocols, but neighboring jurisdictions continued operating under the old system. State legislation improved victim services, but federal coordination remained fragmented. Public awareness increased temporarily, but media attention moved on to other stories, other tragedies, other failures. The most tragic aspect of these systemic failures is how preventable they were. Every bias that delayed Felicia's investigation was well documented in criminal justice research. Every resource shortage that compromised her case had been identified in previous studies. Every training deficiency that hindered the response had been highlighted by advocacy groups for years. The knowledge existed, the will to implement it did not. Legislative changes prompted by Felicia's case included mandatory reporting requirements for informal work platforms, enhanced penalties for predators who target vulnerable populations, and increased funding for missing persons investigations. But legislation only works if it's enforced consistently, and enforcement requires the same commitment to equality that was missing from Felicia's case in the first place. Here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to acknowledge. Felicia Johnson died because we live in a society that has decided some lives matter more than others, and every single one of us participates in that system whether we admit it or not. When we scroll past missing persons posts because the victim doesn't look like someone we know, we're complicit. When we assume financial desperation makes someone less deserving of protection, we're complicit. When we stay silent about injustice because it doesn't directly affect us, we're complicit. You watched this entire video about a woman who was murdered for $500 by a man who knew exactly how to exploit society's blind spots and our collective indifference to certain victims. You learned about systemic failures that could be fixed tomorrow if enough people demanded change. You discovered that predators like Felicia's killer are still out there, still using the same tactics, still counting on our apathy to protect them from consequences. So, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to close this video and forget about Felicia Johnson by tomorrow? Are you going to feel bad for 30 seconds and then move on with your comfortable life? Or are you going to prove that her story actually matters to you by taking action that costs you something, even if it's just the minimal effort of engagement? If you believe Felicia Johnson deserved better, if you think her story should be heard by more people, if you want to honor her memory and prevent other families from suffering the same loss, then subscribe to this channel right now. Every subscription sends a message that victim stories matter, that justice matters, that we refuse to let predators operate in the shadows while society looks the away. Share this video because silence is complicity, and your silence makes you part of the problem. Comment below with one specific thing you'll do differently after hearing Felicia's story. One way you'll be more aware, more protective, more engaged in fighting the systems that failed her. Make your voice count for something more than just consumption of tragedy for entertainment. But I know some of you won't do any of that. You'll watch this entire video. You'll feel appropriately horrified and sympathetic, and then you'll scroll away without lifting a finger to help. You'll consume Felicia's pain like it's just another piece of content, another story to pass the time, another tragedy that doesn't require anything from you except passive attention. If that's you, at least have the courage to tell us why in the comments. Explain why Felicia's story isn't worth a subscription. Justify why her murder doesn't deserve your engagement. Tell us why you think you can watch a woman's final moments be exploited for your entertainment without owing her memory even the smallest gesture of support. Go ahead, defend your apathy. Explain why you're different from the society that failed Felicia, while simultaneously proving you're exactly the same. Tell us why her life matters enough to watch, but not enough to act. I'll be reading every excuse, every rationalization, every justification for why you'll take from her story without giving anything back. Because here's what you need to understand. Every time you consume true crime content without supporting the platforms that bring these stories to light, every time you learn about injustice without demanding change, every time you feel bad about tragedy without taking action, you become part of a system that allows predators to thrive and victims to be forgotten. Felicia Johnson was 24 years old when she was murdered for $500 that never existed. Her killer is serving life in prison, but the systems that failed her are still failing other women right now. Today, while you're watching this video, the only question that matters is whether you're going to be part of the solution or part of the problem that killed her. Subscribe if you believe justice matters. Share if you think her story deserves to be heard. Comment if you're willing to do more than just consume tragedy. And if you won't do any of those things, then at least be honest about why Felicia Johnson's life isn't worth 30 seconds of your time.